with Dr. Joseph Giovinazzo, and today we're going to be discussing his compositional style, and in particular we're going to hone down onto one particular work, The Box of Events, which was performed by the Sirius Chamber Ensemble in November last year. So welcome, Joseph, very much for coming today. Could you actually explain your compositional approach? But before I do that, I came on to the website and found a recording of your pre-concert talk from 1998 from the Richmond Town Hall, of which you said, and I have distillated this, that your compositional approach is in two ways: eclecticism and merging styles that move between styles, and you don't want to particularly write in one particular style. I know that in 1998, that's a long time ago, but is any of that still relevant for today?
I think it's relevant far beyond me, actually. I think one of the key difficulties the contemporary composer has is just, what stylistic direction will I go, or will I take this particular work, etc. And that tends to be something that I end up grappling with every time I move in the direction of writing something, because you knock out, you've got an idea, as some sort of embryonic idea, and that idea could go anywhere, could go in any direction. So the difficulty that I deal with creatively at the outset of getting into the thrust of a composition is what will I do with this idea or this collection of ideas? Where will I take them? Where will I take them stylistically is the first difficulty, because will it be something that moves the work very much in this direction as opposed to that direction, because given where we are with regard to media and technology, and this goes back to the middle of last century really, we're exposed to a lot of things. And we have a lot of ideas floating around, a lot of experiences floating around that we can tap into, and that becomes a bit problematic. I mean, the old days where you wrote in the style of the day resolved many issues that I think the contemporary composer is constantly grappling with.
So how does that reflect what you've been saying now? How does that reflect into this particular work that we're focusing on, a box of events for flute, clarinet and cello?
Well, in a certain sense, it's a low-level resolution of stylistic identity crisis, because it morphs. It morphs over the course of the work. It changes. Now, it's an important part of the identity of the work itself, because the work is designed to do that, but it serves a certain sort of stylistic confusion on my part, in the sense that I can then shift through a range of styles as I progress through the work. But that work, in a certain sense, is conservative with regard to shifting through a range of styles. Not conservative in style. If we go back to me, say 25, 30 years ago, an earlier phase of my compositional experiences, my shifting between styles was much more dramatic. I'd have something that sounded a bit Debussy-esque, and then perhaps, without too much warning, moving into quite a chromatic area. We know that Stravinsky pioneered that sort of juxtapositioning of styles many years ago. It's because I'm a child of what is now, the 20th century, literally, and an adult of the 21st. But there are so many styles of music that I enjoy, that talk to me, that I find it difficult to just do something in one style. And that's where the concept of, or the notion of eclecticism that you mentioned a moment ago comes in. I actually like to move between different styles, but the difficulty then is the consistency. What is the work doing? Where's it going? So in that regard, the box of events, the work that you mentioned a moment ago, is conservative in the sense that it doesn't dramatically move through different styles. But if you compare the end of the work to the beginning of the work, they're really saying two different things, two very different things.
So it is, did you come to the idea of calling it a box of events after you'd finished the work, or did that tailor it while you were tailoring the title at the same time as composition? Because it does come as there are discrete moments in time. It's in that formal structure. There are repetitions so to give it some sort of basis and holding together. So what came first, the title or the composition?
That question you're asking, believe it or not, it touches on a very integral part of my relationship to every piece of music I write, in the sense that when I start to write a piece of music, all I have is some sort of nebulous sort of thing floating around, okay, in my head. What am I going to do? What's it feel like? And as I engage in the writing of a piece of music, images start to come to mind. So in a certain sense, pretty well, more often than not, at the conclusion of a piece of music of mine, there's usually a text that I associate with it. I've usually written a phrase, a sentence, a paragraph, that in some sense captures or reflects the emotional content or what I'm feeling about the work. And the text tends to evolve as the work evolves, because the work, as I said a moment ago, initially is a very nebulous proposition in my head. But as I'm working through the work, there are words that come to mind. There are images, there are pictures, not necessarily an overt narrative, but impressions that come to my mind. And I find that text, concluding or generating some sort of text after the work is finished or towards the latter stages of the work, helps me, acts as a release. It sort of, in my mind, summarises for me, words and ideas that are floating around as I'm creating the work. And it's something that I tend to do. I tend to do it a lot. When I finish the work, there's a connection, a sort of a poetic connection to some words somewhere that tie it all up for me. Help it make sense to me. So in that case, to answer your question, if we can hark back to that one, the title and the accompanying, I included a paragraph, a little story in the program notes. All of that was formulating towards the end of the work. This is what the work's doing. This is what the work's saying. Okay.
You might want to read. Have you got your program note with you?
Yeah.
You might want to read out the paragraph out so you can see where, put it into words what you were saying just now.
Okay, before we proceed, let me apologise. These are not my proper reading glasses, so there might be a little bit of funniness in my reading here. Okay, there we go. The text that I mentioned a moment ago. She earnestly walked with pronounced strides, tenaciously clutching a box to her chest. Having stopped, she gently lowered the box to the ground, lifted its lid, and lunged a hand into the opening. With loose fingers, she slowly waved the hand about, feeling events swirl as undulating gossamer. On each wave, events became more concrete to the touch. She could feel their edges, their shapes, their textures. As one event settled on her up-faced palm, she carefully lifted it out, leaving the box behind, while holding the event to her chest. Walking away with progressively greater purpose and decisiveness, the nestled event grew to become a new box. Apologies for the conclusion of that reading.
Okay, the word that came to mind for me, having listen to what you've articulated in that paragraph is textures. I think that's probably the most important word that, for me, that comes out of that paragraph that comes into that music. The textural play that you do through the moment form, if I want to use that word, that you use throughout it. So is texture an important aspect to you?
Joel, well spotted. Well spotted, yeah. The changing events in the work are very much about textural shifts. Not necessarily shifts in musical language, but motions between different, between the way different, I was going to say events, but that's going to be misleading in this context, between, say, the instruments, between the layers, the lines, there are shifts between how they connect. There are some areas where there might be what is traditionally referred to as counterpoint or polyphony, voices equally competing with each other. Other areas where there's one voice coming through. Now, that itself is not uncommon. It's quite common to move between different textures, but as your intuition correctly led you to believe, or led you to consider, it is an important part of how that work evolves, yes.
How did the work evolve? Were you commissioned to write it from Sirius, or did you have it in your box of scores, or was it? How did that happen? The commissioning process.
I wrote it specifically for a Melbourne Composer League concert. The Melbourne Composers League was putting together a concert, and the league had stipulated. The league was working in conjunction with the ensemble, and there was an agreement about who the performers were going to be and that sort of thing. So I submitted for performance for them, but I had already written but there was a little bit of encouragement from the ensemble in the sense that I'd written a couple of other things that they'd played or been involved with in the past, and they were quite enthusiastic about the work. They spoke with great words of appreciation, which I took and ran with, basically. Yes, they liked the work.
So you'd had an association with the ensemble before this commission? In
particular, the flautist, their regular flautist, who wasn't involved in the performance. She was with child. She was about to have a child at that stage, and she wasn't able to perform. But she was involved in the performance of one work of mine a few years ago, and she asked me to do another rendition of that work for a different instrumentation for Sirius, and they performed that in Sydney. I think about 2 years ago, maybe 3. Yeah, a couple of years ago.
So, just to bounce off the conversation about this particular work. What other works are there that you would direct the audience to listen to of yours? Just a hand, and a couple would be.
Well, there's a little duet that I wrote years ago. I think it was 1995. I think for violin and clarinet. And what's interesting about that work is that it keeps being regurgitated. Okay. Now I'm mentioning it now.
What keeps getting regurgitated?
That work keeps getting performed.
Oh, right.
Regurgitated
Okay.
in the sense of it keeps getting performed, because it's not uncommon for the contemporary composer to write something and it gets performed once at best and never performed again. I mean, that's the life we lead, really. I mean, that's the extent of our expectation generally. This particular work was recently recorded by, it's a duet, flute, clarinet and violin, and performed recently by members of the Queensland Symphony Orchestra. I'm not sure of the details, but in some regard it's going to work with their YouTube channel in some regard. I'm not sure of the details.
What is the work called?
Nen dance. Nen is it's a Japanese word that has a martial art connotation. Simply put, it refers to, it suggests not having any thought. It suggests, within a martial art context, if you're thinking too much, you know, it's within a martial art you've got something going on when someone is engaged in a martial art that very much parallels the sort of thing that occurs, say, in jazz improvisation. You train, you have set patterns, you're functioning within a context, but you try not to think too much about what you're going to do. You try to respond to the moment. And Nen touches on this idea of responding to the moment in the sense that you approach something with no mind. You approach something where you're not thinking about anything, or you're endeavouring to just respond and not be affected by thoughts and ideas, and in particular anticipations. Because within a martial art, if you anticipate, it could be dangerous. You have to respond. And my alluding to a martial art, or my referencing a martial art, has to do with an interest of mine. I'm a very fervent practitioner of a Japanese martial art known as Aikido, and I've been playing around with that for well over 30 years now. And it's a martial art that is premised on the idea of connection of energies. It's a little unusual, very unusual in that regard. Some see it as a non-violent martial art, whatever that might mean. But anyway, but from a philosophical perspective, it's very important to me because it gives me a perspective on how I connect to things, in particular people and their energies and that sort of stuff.
And Nen dance can be located where? Is it on YouTube? Is it on your? Where can people listen to that?
It's on my SoundCloud.
Which is through your website?
Yes, I think it is, yes.
Right.
I think with regard to SoundCloud, I think all the person needs to do is just stick my name in and it's there, basically.
Right, okay.
That might be the easiest thing to do.
Good.
There are a few things there, they can have a listen.
Right.
You can have a listen.
Good. On that note, I think we'll call it quits. Thank you, Joseph, very much for your time today. And we'll go and have a listen to a box of events with the Sirius Chamber Ensemble, recorded on Sunday, the 10th of November, 2019.